set auto-destruct sequence.
What's the time allotted that concerns me?
Recognize Picard, Jean-Luc, Captain. Recognize Riker, William T, Commander.
Maximum warp!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core podcast. I'm Master. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Fert Derby from the Great Q Continuum Beyond. Gentlemen, welcome back to Starfleet Academy, Starfleet Headquarters, Starfleet Podcast, whatever you want to call it. We are back with the Next Generation crew today. Really looking forward to talking about this one. It's really our first foray into some of the nuance and mysticism of Klingon culture, or Klingon, as they said in the original series a couple of times. And notice they don't speak much Klingonese, but I'm excited to see a very Worf-forward discussion today. Gentlemen, we are talking, of course, about Heart of Glory. And I'm going to say right now, didn't get a lot of Heart of Glory out of this episode myself, but there was a lot of other Klingon stuff going on. So, Fert Derby, take us through Heart of Glory. What happened here?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Warp Core. We are on episode 19, season 1, Star Trek The Next Generation, Heart of Glory. It first aired on March 21st, 1988. Our director is Rob Bowman. This is his 5th. We've only done 19 episodes this season. This is number 5 for Mr. Bowman in season 1, one of our returning champions. We have a story by Maurice Hurley, showrunner, Herbert Wright, and D.C. Fontana. This could be one of the last D.C. Fontanas, not possibly the last, but one of the last credited appearances by that original series veteran. And our teleplay was by showrunner Maurice Hurley. And this would be the 4th episode that he gets a credit on, whether it's a full teleplay, a story by credit, or in the case of the one where he clashed with Gene Roddenberry, took a pseudonym, C.J. Holland. That was actually Hiding Q. When those two came to blows, not physically, but metaphorically. This is Mr. Hurley's 4th. Again, Maurice played a big role in the early development of the first 2 seasons of Star Trek, but if you read between the lines, between people behind the cameras and in front of the cameras, he apparently was a bit of a prickly pear. And that's just reporting how other cast members and crew members felt in dealing with him, and have cited him as somebody that they had to work through some things in order to work with him. So, good writer, a showrunner who kept the trains running on time, but didn't always win Favorite Coworker of the Week award. If you go by, again, Gates McFadden and Marina Sirtis and Hannah Louise Shear of the writing crew, and so Tracy Torme and so on and so forth. So, Maurice, what did you give us? Well, you gave us the very first episode to explore Worf's background, which will be a returning theme through not just this show, but Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And gentlemen, I don't think Ursa Master gave us enough steak there. This is the first time we've ever tried to delve into Klingon culture, Klingon religion, Klingon masculinity, toxic Klingon. We all remember the original series. They would pop up as antagonists. They would have varying degrees of successful makeup. And again, they were just supposed to be the scary other that our stalwart Enterprise NCC 1701 crew would be opposing for the purposes of said episode, including the delightful Trouble with Tribbles. But it wasn't until they kind of gave us a reboot of the franchise with a big screen excitement that the Klingons kind of became front and center in Star Trek The Motion Pictures opening, and in Star Trek III The Search for Spock, and hanging around in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, and Star Trek V The Final Frontier, Star Trek VI. Klingons were the big bads for all but Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and they even made a quick appearance there in the Kobayashi Maru simulator. They had better design makeup. They had their own language that was thoughtfully created and crafted and rehearsed. But again, they functioned more from the plot as these are the guys standing in our way of saving Spock and reaching the final frontier and so on. So just try to remember, we've kind of absorbed decades worth of Klingon lore now, and we were just talking about this for Strange New Worlds, the glory of Stovacor. I believe, Ursa Master, we waxed poetic about the honor of dying in battle and so forth, having a good death. None of that is possible without this very episode. And if you remember back in 1988, those of you old enough to remember, we didn't know how deep they were going to scratch. Was this just going to be a quickie to say, hey, we got to give the Klingons something to do in this episode? I don't think anyone could have anticipated how much the fan reaction and further episodes would have mined such dramatic gold by taking a look at this, and treating the Klingons as a culture, as a race, as a people, and giving them shadings and depth that we otherwise never would have explored. The Star Wars franchise, which we cover, of course, in our Graying Jedi podcasts. Make sure you'll be checking those out in the Warp Core archives and the pending rebrand archives. They did the similar during the Book of Boba Fett. They tried to give the Tusken Raiders more identity and more purpose. Maybe they took a page out of Star Trek. It's impossible. It's possible, but it gives your antagonists and your villains and so forth more depth. You might actually start to flip the script and say, wait a minute, maybe these guys aren't so bad in certain circumstances and all of that. So I love this show, this particular episode, for what it did to give us the first steps towards a deeper Klingon understanding and appreciation and so forth. They didn't solve it all in one episode, but they certainly, this episode is foundational, as Urza Master likes to put it. And that's why I think it holds up very, very well, even all these years and decades later. If you recognize the Klingon battle cruiser, well, again, you're eagle-eyed and a Trekkie, because it was reused from Star Trek the Motion Picture. Vaughn Armstrong, who played Chorus, the leader of the renegade rogue Klingons, he would go on to play 11 different roles in the franchise. You heard me right. I'll say it again for those of us just joining. Vaughn Armstrong would play 11 roles throughout the Star Trek series. He would not reprise Chorus for reasons that we'll get into in a few moments. But yes, here was a versatile character actor who could disappear under any makeup or just put him in actual human face and let him run with it. So good for you, Vaughn. And let's see if we can spot him now, and through all of his 11 appearances as we go forward here. Keep your eyes out. Put a little bookmark or on your bingo card for a Vaughn Armstrong appearance. Gentlemen, again, this episode was not without flaws, and I think the first 10 minutes or so, as they were exploring the runes, if you will, looking for life signs, or life forms, those tiny little life forms. They were doing horror beats without any real horror. And I thought, we spent 5 minutes with Picard being seemingly sidetracked by using Geordi's visor as an ability to see the visual acuity, to be able to see what Geordi sees. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a great moment, because for the first time also in the show, we get to like a glimpse into what Geordi, how he perceives the world. And I actually really enjoy the moment. I just don't know that if you beam down to a hostile environment where time is of the essence. You're looking for survivors, and this freighter could go up at any time. I don't know that it's the best time to like take a pause and say, Jordy, look over there. What do you see? Look at that. I mean, it just felt oddly misplaced in the context of what we were trying to see. The freighter itself apparently will be reused. We can also, with our Von Armstrong, try and keep an eye on how many times that particular freighter resurfaces. It gave me a very 1978 Battlestar Galactica vibe, the exterior, for some reason. It just looked like one of the ships of the fleet. For all of you Richard Hatch, Dirk Benedict fans out there. But anyways, the first 10 minutes or so before the Klingons actually appear in this episode, it was a little shaky for me, and I also thought that they were really sort of overselling the dialogue. They weren't acting with each other. They were kind of acting to the camera or something. It felt like a lot of pronouncements rather than like dialogue and so forth. So I wasn't really thrilled about 10 minutes in, but as we got the Klingons onto Enterprise D and we explored their story more, and we brought in the battle cruiser and all that, then the market just kept going up and up and up. So I don't know. Did you gentlemen see any hesitation early? Did you notice any of those quibbles? They were quibbles, not tribbles, but still, they kind of recovered, right? They teetered on the balance beam, found their footing, and then nailed the landing, and got a pretty good score from the East German judges. What did you guys think of Heart of Glory?
I think it was probably, not to step on Lord Uther's toes here, I know he loves Klingonese. It's delicious, that gach. But I think they did a pretty good job, all things considered. It started out weird with the whole Geordi visor feed tap thing, which kind of gave us a little bit of a flash forward to, I mean, they harken back to that in the movies, right? So maybe that was their way of redeeming that little moment that didn't quite fit in the episode. But it was interesting. It also made it a little less boring exposition for them to just be on some beat-up freighter in the middle of nowhere that they came across looking for life forms. It gave some purpose and utility to why they were there, other than just a little investigation. Like, it seems a little, let's just say for the flagship of the Federation, it seems a little below their rank kind of thing. And then coming across, two Klingons, well, 3 Klingons, but 2 that were going to survive anyway, that were, sort of, why were they there? And they had a somewhat reasonable explanation, but at the same time, it's just like, it seems like there's a lot of Star Trek episodes where, like, Klingons just sort of show up, and everyone's like, why are you here? And they're like, well, I was out for a walk, and I got abducted by aliens. I love the exposition, but it feels a little bit like this is obviously suspect. And Picard is immediately like, there's something they're not telling us. Well, of course there's something they're not telling you. Like, come on. But I love that Worf kind of immediately catches on. But, in that he's suspect, he's loyal. You're getting this picture of a future officer who's going to take over the security spot. Spoiler alert, Tashiar won't be there in a few episodes. You're really fleshing out a character that I think was fairly one-dimensional up until this point. Kind of that vicious sort of attack dog on the bridge that goes after Q, or, really doesn't fit quite a character mold. It's like we've been talking about many characters all this time. They're figuring out, like, who are these people? Where do they fit in this first season? Which, I mean, it's to be expected, but again, we're not talking Strange New Worlds where they establish a character like that because either we know them from the original series or they've got this economy of words because they only have 8 to 10 episodes a season. Not so much when you get 26. So were really able to dive into nuance and detail all this time. I mean, we get a way more Tashiar And it's nice that they kind of figured out that this isn't working. Because then we start to get some more Worf, and it's like, all right.
I don't know how you feel she is on her security job, but she couldn't even get the transporter working for a minute there. And I'm like, now I'm starting to see it. Or so, like, come on. You had one job, and it's like...
all that transporter is and that's it. Like, we don't see them do anything else with that transporter. It's not like in Galaxy Quest where they have to use 2 joysticks to get it to, like, align like some arcade machine where it's a little loose and hasn't been lubricated. Don't get me wrong. Denise Crosby's a fine actor. I just think their cast of characters was crowded, and somebody had to drop off. And really, I think it's 2 people, and we get the second person much later in the series. But it really worked out so that, you know, as Yar is kind of doing one of these, Worf is doing one of these.
There you go.
This episode really, I mean, it adds some mystique to him where it's like, he knows a lot about Klingon culture for somebody who grew up basically in the Federation with humans. And that, I mean, it doesn't stop being interesting. Throughout this whole series, throughout DS9, and as all his appearances in the movies and in Picard, like, it's never-ending intrigue. And the thing that kind of stinks is that Michael Dorn isn't going to get his own, like, Section 31 Worf series, which would be fantastic, by the way. Like, they should do that. But I don't know. It's a solid episode in terms of creating Klingon lore. It does seem kind of like an obvious something's afoot type episode, you know, with some impulses. Like, I think from the jump we all kind of knew that, like, all right, these guys are probably on the run or something. There's something going on here. They're nefarious, but they don't really tip their hand. Like, you just sort of know it inherently, but they don't show it for a long time into the episode. You could very easily assume that they're just weird. You know, I think if you were just completely unknowing and didn't catch the context of something's afoot, it might catch you by surprise. And probably in '88, I'm going to guess on first viewing, it did for a lot of people.
This episode, if it would have kept going the way it started, might have rivaled the alternative factor. Oof. Because you even get, like, 2 different versions of what people see, in a sense. But yeah, it was not looking good, but luckily ended strong. And I think, you know, to both your points, Worf's arc starts here. Like, this is the beginning of this learning about him and his complete character arc. And I think we see in the next episode, too, that they are catching on that he's the one that should be there. And I'll expand on that in our next podcast here, because I want to talk about him on the bridge and stuff like that. But yeah, great dive into Klingon culture, seeing things we haven't seen before, right? They're starting to establish some canon here and kind of figuring that out. And I love how Tasha Yar handles the abduction of the child. Oh, that was close. I thought that Klingon was going to take that kid hostage, Worf. I mean, it's just like, who is... bad. Just, you could see that they had to move on from her. And by the way, when that Klingon fell through that glass floor, if I was a worker down in engineering, I would be a little worried about walking on some of those decks there, that if I step wrong, I'm going to crash all the way through. You think that would have a little more resilience there as well. And the Klingons, when they were putting together that disruptor that they had, I mean, I would have been like, the guy was literally holding it together as he was walking through the corridor, like holding this prop together. They could have done a little bit of a better job there. But again, from where the episode started to how it ended, it wound up, to me, being a really good, solid episode that you could build upon. And I didn't realize it until obviously seeing this episode. The Geordi Visor part is very important for Generations, the movie. That's an important, winds up being an important piece. So, it felt very forced, right? Like, they felt like they had to put this in. this is what Geordi sees. I mean, we could have done it a little differently, but yeah, and Picard giving him the commands, walk over there. I mean, it was very odd with them doing that.
I'm so glad you mentioned the bridge thing, because again, in television, it was the same in '88 as it is in 2025. You always want to save a buck, save 10 cents, and so forth. And they very easily could have had Worf phaser chorus, and he collapses to the ground and goes "erg, arg," and then he's dead. And I want to give them credit because we've seen some fight scenes in Vasquez Rocks in the original series and so forth. Yes. So the fight choreography, and then by the time we get to Strange New Worlds, I mean, it's almost like watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon or The Matrix or something. You're like, whoa, this is a whole different language of violence that you can get. To have him fall through the decks and smash and all that, like, it would have been great in '88, and it was still great in 2025. I'm like, wow, I'm so glad they did that. They didn't have to do it. Chorus is dead, but they gave it that little punch, and you just kind of viscerally, I can't say that word this early in the morning, viscerally, you react to it in a way. And so I was very pleased that the producers didn't say, we're not sending him through the glass. What are you talking about, Bowman? Get back there and shoot this thing over his shoulder, kind of a thing. So that was very cool. Also, the music, Ron Jones, I believe, was this week's composer, because he and Dennis McCarthy often trade episodes, or one will do two at a time and then the next guy will come in. Ron Jones so wanted to do Jerry Goldsmith's Klingon theme, and if you listen to it carefully, like, there's echoes and DNA of it, but he never actually get to play it because, again, Jerry Goldsmith didn't really sort of start leaning back into Trek until 1989 when he scored The Final Frontier. They licensed his motion picture theme for this show, but he was not doing like full-on composing for Trek until 1989, so we're still another year plus out. And then after that, I mean, we get him for doing the Voyager theme, and we've got him doing the big screen movies, beginning with First Contact. And so I don't know if it was just a case of a meeting of the minds. I don't know if, like, Paramount and him said, yeah, come back to the tents, Jerry. We loved your stuff, But it felt like they couldn't use his theme, right? Like, it felt like, legally speaking or whatever, but they said, and so, like I say, you hear things that could turn into it in this episode that could have been the Klingon theme, but then they stop or they go a different direction musically. And I always am paying attention to things like score, and it was interesting. I was like, yep, I hear it, but I don't hear it. So that was something there that was very good. By the way, cowards take hostages. So Tasha Yar was absolutely right, according to there. And yes, I think that, and then the other thing, I think Worf got him some lunch as they're sitting there discussing, because this was a very episode, we were in high school when we saw it. This was very much peer pressure, like, come on, you want to be a Klingon, you want to kill, come on. It was very much like, just say no. But I think Worf served him up lunch, and I saw greens on the plate, and I don't think they had properly worked out. Maybe Klingons are good with a side salad, but I just thought Klingons and greens, like, that's not the first meal I would have thought that I would have thought something with bone and sinew and tissue would have been more appropriate. But maybe the caterer that day is like, screw it, here, I've got spinach, I've got kale, here, you guys make something out of it.
I do feel like one other thing that they kind of establish here, that this just kind of came to me when you're talking about the Klingons, is that, and I think we see this a lot, right? There are little offshoots of Klingons who don't agree with what the Klingon Empire is doing. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's important, because we wind up, we do see that several more times, right? But I think this is really the first time we kind of get that feeling of, hey, we don't agree with this, and we're going to resist this, and that becomes an important theme. I mean, throughout, right? I mean, we get it in generations. I mean, that's kind of the thing behind it, right? So I think that's something See, yeah, you can't say whatever you said, and
Viscerally.
canonically, whatever. In
Albuquerque.
canon, that's why I don't teach language arts. It becomes something important in the canon of Klingon and Star Trek lore.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good plot device because I think we look at Star Trek 6. I mean, obviously there's a huge part of this Klingon empire that's like, this isn't us. We're bred to be warriors. This is our whole culture, and you're agreeing to peace with our greatest enemy? Like, that doesn't make sense after all the wars and all the skirmishes and the neutral zone. The good news is, like, that really doesn't topple over. Like, that fighting spirit lasts forever. And this is kind of, our first foray into not just the conflict that still exists, but the fact that, like, they're still badass warriors, and of course we're going to get introduced to some much scarier big bads throughout this series, and that's kind of the beauty of Star Trek is, like, there's something to be said about the utopia vision of Starfleet in the future, in the original series, but the next generation really highlights that, not all is well, but at the same time all could continue to get better and better. And that's, I think, a theme that we're going to continue to talk about with Star Trek forever. I don't think it's limited to just this series, which is great. But this episode, on its own, where does it fall in the Warp Core ratings? I found myself struggling with this one a bit. So, Lord Uther, I'm curious, how did you fall on Heart of Glory?
I'm going to go... I was going to go 5.5. I'm going to go 5. It would have been... I'm going to go 5. No, I'm going to go 5.5. Because we see, just from our discussion here today, we see important precedents or ideas established, right? We see the beginning of Worf really becoming Worf. The first 10 minutes just could have completely destroyed this episode. I mean, I thought we were going down a very bad path, and it wound up ending, to me, it ended very strong, and it brought about a lot of important things that we're going to see in Star Trek. So I'm going to go 5.5. How about you, Fert?
Well, in my hand-scribbled notes, which actually look like the written Klingon, I have down for the first 10 minutes here as I'm doodling, I wrote 4, because I'm like, this may be just kind of a run-of-the-mill. Then suddenly I was at 5, and I'm like, yeah. And then when I finished the episode, before I started the next one, I said, you know what? This is more of a 5, but it's not quite in the upper echelons because of those flaws. So, Lord Uther, you gave me into 5.5, and I'm right there with that idea. Again, I didn't get an opportunity, or I had the opportunity, I just did not answer it. I didn't get to watch this for the first time in 1988. Many of these episodes I'm now experiencing in 2025 after having seen the big screen films and later seasons. I did eventually catch on late in the show's run. I'd say midway through season 6, I think I started watching it every week. And then, of course, I watched DS9 and I watched Voyager. And so it's not like I didn't know what Star Trek was. But these early episodes and these early seasons, I didn't see them back then. And I didn't see them for many years, obviously. And when I'm watching them, I kind of get this sense that I'm watching like a really good prequel. Because I know where these characters end up. I know that they end up eventually in season 3 of Picard. And I mean, I know what their final endpoints are as of this taping. And so it's kind of fun to see the genesis of Worf and Geordi and, the Riker Troy. And I mean, they didn't start out as prequels, obviously. And I think I would have had a much different perspective as a 15-year-old than I do now as a 52-year-old. But I'm just kind of treating this whole thing as like, oh, wow, look, I get to go back in time and see these guys, the prequel, pre-generations, pre-first contact big screens, and it's fun. So I'm a little more optimistic and a little more hopeful. I know that some wags online don't like season 1 and 2 and early of this and early of that. And I don't quite feel that. I feel that these are, they're imperfect, but they're taking those steps that we want to see because again, we know where they end up. So 5.5, I think, is very deserving, and I can't wait to see more Klingon lore, more Worf, and full things forward there.
I think from where this episode started, much along where both of you landed, 5.5 seems incredibly generous. But I do agree. I think it finished exceptionally strong. I thought the final struggle and Worf embellishing a bit, he died with honor, really kind of brought this episode up a little bit. I love Michael Dorn's personality as Worf. I think, from starting as that attack dog to really becoming a character we care about, and I think it's this episode that does that. You know how I am with foundational episodes of Trek. Like I'm right there in the upper echelon with most of them. I think this one had a weak start, and that isn't necessarily the fault of the latter 2 acts. I don't want to just redeem the start of this episode by saying, well, Lursa had a good plan for this later on. No, I'm going to have to knock it down a small peg for starting off on a weak footing. But it was interesting. Like, I found the alternative factor interesting to a point. I think on just that stance, if this was a whole how does Geordi see episode, probably would have been a 1 or maybe a 2. The rest of this episode is probably closer to a 6, so I'm going to land at 5. I think this started off rough, but absolutely from the wailing moment of the 3 Klingons in sickbay on, this really was a strong showing for Star Trek, and absolutely is a must-see. If you want to understand the rest of Star Trek, you have to view this episode, so it's hard to give it anything less than a 5. And they do very well. I don't think they go too over the top. The breaking of the glass floor seems a little bit like space glass can do them, but Klingons are heavy. But then why doesn't Worf just fall through floors?
I thought Scotty made that clear aluminum that nothing
can
can
hold
get
whales
through. You
and
think that would be everywhere on every
Transparent
starship?
aluminum.
Fun fact, for all of you pending rebrand viewers out there, there is real transparent aluminum now. The science has finally proven it true. So, once again, Star Trek proves that Star Trek 4 is the greatest Star Trek movie of all time, and that the science is there. Wow. You just got to figure it out.
I got to throw one more thing out there before we fade out here and go to Warp 8. Worf's yell at the end, go back and watch it again, everybody. If that is not the Bill Shatner Khan yell, I don't know what is, because they even back away from him as he does that yell, but it was very Khan-ish the way it kind of echoed. So I had to throw that out there.
If only they had gone to a planet outside. Well, with that, we will conclude on Heart of Glory, having found the glory in the heart of this episode, and looking forward to the next foray into the next generation. But before we get there, make sure you're hopping into those archives. Make sure you are subscribing, dropping us comments, letting us know how you felt about Heart of Glory and all the other episodes. And don't forget to share this to your fellow Star Trek fans out there. I know there are many places where you can hear about Star Trek, but there's only one Warp Core podcast, and it's only right here on Pending Rebrand on YouTube, also on Spotify for you audio folks out there. Until next time, make it so.